We live in a fallen world, and sometimes things don't always go the way we anticipate, and especially in the kitchen. That's why we keep learning skills, and we become innovative in being able to handle some of the things that present themselves as crisis, and the Lord helps us to journey through that. And that's what I thought to share in today's video, as well as my sourdough journey, just how I'm working with my sourdough, because I've been getting quite a number of questions on sourdough, and I thought as much as I'm on the learning process, I could share just a bit what I'm doing with my sourdough. And as I begin the video, you can see I just fed my sourdough that afternoon, and this is evening, and I'm really grateful that it's bubbly, it's fermented so well. And so I thought as I share a bit of what happened in the kitchen, I can also just journey through this video, just sharing a bit of how I'm working with my sourdough this season. I know seasons keep changing, but this is what I'm doing to be able to ensure that a lot of my recipes I am working with sourdough. And I am not showing the full process because quite a number of these recipes I've shared on our other channel, Recipes and Hospitality with Clara, and of course some that I've developed in this video, I'm perfecting them, and then of course they will land on that channel, and then I will have them linked in the description of this video. Some of them are also on our blog at formationsofanooblewoman.com. So this video I'm beginning with just kneading the dough of my sourdough donuts, a very delightful recipe because my daughter, our youngest, loves donuts, and she keeps wondering, when are we going to make donuts? So this one I make it just simple with the recipes that I've linked in the description below. The only difference I did with this one was instead of rubbing in the marge or the butter, I melted it and poured it in, and I also added half a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. You can do without the bicarbonate, but I just found it works even better. So I needed it. And also the other difference was I didn't put in the eggs at this point. This is in the evening, as I shared, I had told you earlier, and so I decided to add the eggs the next day. But honestly speaking, after this experience, I think I'd rather just add in the eggs, because 8 to 12 hours ferment I don't think is going to affect your eggs so much. It's been working okay. I just thought, let me try and see what happens. But I think I will just add my 2 eggs in the dough and allow everything to ferment together. Yeah, so after kneading, I covered with a kitchen towel so that I could give it that long ferment overnight for about 10 hours. I ended up working with about 10 hours. And then this one, I'm working on 4 loaves of bread. This is usually my weekly meal prep. Recipes may go for a week or 2, and this is something I like to do sometimes, especially when I'm at home on Sunday afternoons. It's been a rather busy season, so finding one day to meal prep has been tricky. So I find meal prepping at least on Sunday afternoon, from Sunday afternoon to the next day on Monday, sets me up for the week with meal prepped meals. So I'm working on 4 loaves. You might have noticed my melted butter was mixed with the milk, and this is because the melted butter is a little hot, so I didn't want it to burn my sourdough starter. That's why I just added the milk into the melted butter and then added it into the dry ingredients for the bread. So again, this recipe is a bit different because I've done 8 cups of all-purpose flour, half a cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of bicarbonate of soda, and then I have added in 3 tablespoons of butter, and then my sourdough starter 2 cups, and then just finished off with a cup of milk, and then the rest was water. I think it was about 2.5 cups of water, but usually I just work with water until I get to a very soft sticky dough, which, as you saw, I kneaded a little bit in my basin or my bowl, big bowl, and then just covered it, set it aside so that I can work again on it tomorrow so that it can also bulk ferment. So that was slightly different from what I do with bread, but if you would want to work with that recipe, that's what I did. And of course, just before the night goes, because I don't do a lot of sourdough now that we are a family of 4, sometimes 5 or 6 if we have guests. So I work with a container where I work with perhaps 2 to 3 recipes. And then now I've gone ahead and fed my sourdough starter so that I can be ready to work with more recipes the next day. And of course, doing some nighttime clearing, like I have shared on this channel before. When I'm able, sometimes I have meetings online at night, so I'm not able to do this. But usually when I'm able, I like to leave the kitchen clear as much as possible. And thankfully, I was able to do that today, just ensuring that the surfaces are clean. This is the not so interesting part of homemaking, but of course, when we keep the big picture in mind, we will enjoy the process. You keep clearing this, clearing the kitchen, and then tomorrow it will get dirty again you do it. I mean, it's just monotonous, but thank God when we keep the big picture in mind of why we home make, providing a conducive environment for the purposes of God to thrive in our lives, in the lives of the members of our households, in the lives of our guests, then we can do this with joy and gladness. Of course, I like to reward myself with a nice cup of tea, with just enough milk, enough water, enough tea leaves, and of course some rosemary. I find rewarding myself this way is wonderful. I don't always take tea as I go to sleep, but I like to reward myself once in a while. So now this is the next morning. Wow, my sourdough has just been doing well. So you can see I fed it the previous night. So I do some recipes the previous night, then I do recipes the following night, and then before I store it, to wait again for another week or so. So you can see nice, bubbly, doing well. This one has been going for almost a year, and I'm trusting God it will keep going for years to come. As I'm told, the older, the better. So I just wanted to show you that. You can see it's even spilled over. I'm really grateful for that. So those are my recipes that were bulk fermenting on the counter. So I begin with the donut one because we are working with it for breakfast. Of course, this is holiday time, so we can be a little late with our breakfast. So I'm adding my 2 eggs to this. Like I said, the full recipe is on the other channel. Apart from what I explained, I did differently, putting in the eggs later. But like I said, I will in future just work with all the ingredients, including the eggs, because they have been working. I know people can be a bit concerned, or the egg has stayed too long, it can get spoiled. I think this has not been the case for my recipes. Even when I wasn't working with sourdough and I needed mandazi to relax, the dough to relax overnight, I just would put in the egg and it will be okay. So I believe it's okay. But in case you're concerned about your eggs, you can always do what I have done, add them in later on, like I'm doing. The reason why I don't like this is because also mixing in the eggs once you have done the dough is quite some work. And as you can see, I just had to add a little flour, that is a little flour, about a 1/4 cup, because again the eggs were big and so the dough was going to be too sticky. I like my doughs very sticky, but you don't want them to be too sticky to an extent that they are runny, because you want them slightly heavy. So I needed to add some little flour. Thankfully, it didn't affect the recipe. I didn't add sugar, I didn't add salt. It was just good. So again, because I had interfered with it, I was going to cover and just give it about 20 to 30 minutes to rest before I work on the donuts. And then now went ahead and worked on the bread one, just kneading it to beat it down and then dividing it up so that I could place it in the baking tins where I was going to bake it. I wanted to bake it like bread roll, So I worked on 4 big rolls, as you will see. So that's what I like to do with my sourdough. Now that, like I said, our household is smaller, I prefer to just work with a sourdough that is sufficient to do at most 3 recipes, and that means about 3 cups of sourdough. So usually when I feed my sourdough starter with that cup that I did with, which is about 1 cup, 1¼ cups of the measuring cup, and of course an equivalent amount of liquid, together with the discard that was originally in the container, it gives me about 3 cups of sourdough starter, which is sufficient to cover about 3 to 4 recipes, especially 3 to 4 cup flour recipes. So this particular sourdough, I'm going to work with it with quite a number of recipes, about 3 of them. So now you saw the bread, I transferred it to the tins and then covered it so that it could relax for about an hour. Though because of the activities in the kitchen, it ended up relaxing for a long time, perhaps 2 or so hours, and so it really spread so much. But thank God it's not sourdough for sale or, for show. It's for us at home. So again, as I make my donuts, I like to improvise with that cup that will usually cover the hot water bottle or the thermos, and then of course a bottle top for the normal water bottles that we buy. So once I've made the donut pieces, I will cover them so that they can relax for about 20 to 30 minutes before we go ahead and deep fry them. The other thing I do on Monday is, thank God we planted this rosemary bush and it is doing so well. And because I want to reduce my trips of going outside to pick a little rosemary when I need it and back inside, I just like to collect a number of pieces that I can use through the week. So I fill up my bottle with water, leaving just space for the rosemary leaves to be able to get into the water. And then once I've done that, I will keep taking bits of it. If I need a full stem, I remove, and this will take care of my whole week. Rather than going out whenever I need rosemary, sometimes I regret, I didn't put rosemary in that recipe because I forgot, but when it's on my counter, I'm able to use it. Like now this morning, we like our tea with rosemary this season, so that's why I'm putting a few of the leaves, let me call them leaves of rosemary, into the tea, and then now continuing to work on my donuts. So you can see that's just how I work with my sourdough, keeping it as simple as that, because once I have done the recipes, usually I will, after the second day, the little that is left, I like to leave very little, because when I leave very little, by the time I feed it, it does so well. But when I leave a lot of it, sometimes it becomes a bit unmanageable, especially if I don't have something to do with the discard immediately. Though that's not a problem, you can find something to do with the discard. But sometimes when I leave just a little of the sourdough, I think I find it more manageable. So this day, actually, I would have covered what was left, which would be very little, and kept it in the fridge so that I could use it again after a week. But I overheard my husband invite quite a number of people to our house tomorrow. That's the next day. So I knew I wanted to make something with the sourdough for them. I happen to be a very structured person, but my husband happens to be spontaneous. So I fed the sourdough so that I could work on some mandazis to serve, to allow them to bulk ferment that evening. Make them that evening, allow them to bulk ferment so that I can make the mandazi the next day. So that's how our donuts looked. Very, very, very tasty. I can tell you we enjoyed it, including those who tasted it, who happened to be in our house. This next recipe, again, just mixing the dry ingredients. Thank God it's going to be on our channel soon, and that's sourdough marble cake. Very delightful kind of cake. I believe, I think I will allow you to look at that recipe that I will link in the description below, just in case I miss the details of that recipe, so that I don't confuse you. But basically, it's a chocolate cake, but I will begin by making it basic without putting any cocoa powder. with just flour, sugar, salt, bicarbonate of soda, baking powder. Mix that and then mix in there the eggs, the milk, the cooking oil, and of course active sourdough starter. Then the vanilla, I'm going to put it in later. So that's a delightful recipe again that we really loved, but I'm hoping that once I share it in the description below, you're going to check it out because it's coming soon. It was so nice. A wonderful one for an occasion, perhaps a birthday, or just for fun, or for your tea times, or for breakfast. I'm saying for birthday because I ended up frosting it, but again healthier than your normal marble cake because it's sourdough. So try that one. I hope you will enjoy. And this one now that I'm working on is sourdough focaccia bread, depending on how you pronounce it. Again, a very delightful recipe. I really liked it, but I wouldn't want to share this recipe again because, as you know, we keep working on our recipes to reduce them a little. So this particular one, I'm actually going to reduce the amount of oil that I used, but it was very delightful and very simple because you're working with just flour. I worked with 3 cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda, and then I added in a tablespoon of cooking oil, and then the rest was water, about 1.5 cups, I believe. But of course, like I said, once I am confident of the recipe, I will share on our other channel and have it linked below. A very delightful kind of bread that ends up looking like a pizza piece that you can fill up, and I can't wait for the day we will use it because this one was going to be frozen so that I would see how to work with it. So allow it to rest, and then after 20 minutes I will go in with the folds that will usually be done on sourdough bread. You will see in a short while. So the next recipe that I'm working on, again, this one I shouldn't really share the recipe because honestly I'm testing it. I am testing sourdough brioche bread. I have a recipe of brioche bread on our channel, but it's not sourdough. For this one, I worked with 3/4 cup sourdough starter, 3 eggs, 3 tablespoons of margarine or butter, heaped initially and then melted them. I used margarine because that's quite a lot. As you know, butter is very costly, and I'm trusting God for a way to make my own butter at home in future. So just added in the dry ingredients and a little milk because the dry ingredients are basically 3 cups of flour. I believe that I used 1/2 cup of sugar or less, and then a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda, and of course a teaspoon of salt. I believe that was it. If I got it wrong, I'll have it there so that you can see, but I'm testing it. So once I have the recipe, okay, I will share it on our other channel and link it in the description below. So that was brioche. So all this, as you saw, once I'm done with working on them, what I end up doing is just covering them with a clean kitchen towel so that they can bulk ferment the whole day, and then we can work on them in the evening. Back to our focaccia, because this is about 20 minutes later. Let me show you what I meant by working on the folds, because you want it to incorporate in as much air as possible so that it has those delightful sourdough air bubbles within the finished product, as you will see. I need to mention that the dough is rather sticky, so it helps to wet your hands before you begin to do those folds, or else it will just stick on your hands so much. I really liked how it turned out, and I know you will also love this recipe once I share it in the description. So basically that's how I work with my sourdough. And now our bread, like I said, took probably too long to rest, and ferment again a little longer, as you can see. And so just going in with some egg wash. Egg wash is simply a mixture of egg and some milk. Beat that up and then just use it to brush your bread so that it has that delightful color. So this is where my problems began. I had them in the oven and baked and baked and baked. My oven has a problem. I didn't know that. But anyway, like I said, I decided I normally leave very little sourdough starter and keep it in the freezer, as you saw, very little. So I'm adding in just a little this time so that I can work on that final recipe of mandazi that I was going to make the next day. So allowed it again to get bubbly, so got to work on that recipe at night. So after this, as my bread baked, I took my wok, which happens to be my prayer wok as well, something that I really love to do unless I have no choice. Sometimes days go differently and you're not able to do I'm not able to do this, but I just love my wok because it allows me time to not only exercise but pray. So I came back again. It was time to do the folds again on my focaccia dough, and I did this 4 times before now I allowed it to bulk ferment the whole day so that I could work on it at night. And so having done this, went to sort some laundry in the process. So this is a day when I just do a lot of things now that I'm starting the week, and I'm hopeful for a fruitful week. I also got to get into my garden to pick some terere. Oh, terere has just been a blessing this rainy season. It's one of those vegetables that just grows unhindered, and right now it's actually developed the seeds. But I was so amazed because I happened to have a guest and I needed vegetables. Our market is far, the place where we can buy anything. So got this. So had a lot of, you can see a lot of the seeds. A stem is when I realized, oh, terere can survive, dear people. So cut that up into small pieces and we made ugali with it. And I will also share in the description in case you're interested in our very simple terere recipe with cream. Very delicious. You're going to enjoy this one. So terere, the stems are soft, so I discovered, and it stretched our food and we really enjoyed it. So I wanted to share with us what happened. My bread baked and baked and baked probably for over an hour and a half. I'm not sure long, which is not usually the case. I think there was a problem that probably needs to be sorted. I tried to blow in even with a blow dryer in case the vent for releasing the gas is blocked, to no avail. And so I turned to my skill that I share on our other channel, baking without an oven on your gas stove or cooker. This is what I did so that it could brown on the surface. Because it was not browning, it was taking ages to cook. Until I get to sort that oven, or it pleases the Lord to give us another one, I'm back to baking without an oven like I did in the past. And in case you haven't watched that channel, usually I bring the fire up to full flame for about 30 seconds just to heat up the pan. Then I reduce it as though I'm switching off and reduce to that lowest you've just seen. And usually that's sufficient to bake our bread. So this one again, the other one now putting on another wide pan so that it can bake at least on the surface for about 20 minutes so that it can fully cook. So this costed me a lot. That's my terere. This costed me a lot in terms of time because I did quite a number of recipes expecting them to be baked in the oven. Now I was going to bake the whole evening on top of my gas stove while making supper. That obviously meant that I slept very late because I didn't want to bake. That's our terere, guys. We enjoyed it. I was not going to allow these ones to ferment for a shorter period. I wanted them to ferment for at least over 8 hours. So by the time I started baking, them it was a bit late. I slept after midnight, but grateful for the skill of baking without an oven on your gas stove or cooker. Please get to learn how to bake that way. In case you're also in a setting like mine and you're not able to bake with an oven, you have a skill of how to bake without an oven. So this one is our focaccia bread. As you saw, it had fermented really well. So I put some cooking oil, about 4 tablespoons. This is where I felt I would reduce the oil. I think it was too much. I greased my pan first, and then I put about 4 tablespoons of cooking oil. I might reduce to 2 and see what happens. And then just ensure to cover half of the piece of dough with the cooking oil in the pan, as you saw. This is about a pans that are about 10 to 11 inches in diameter. Did the same with the remaining half dough in another 10 or 11 inch pan, and then allowed them again to ferment for about an hour. So meanwhile, our chocolate dough is ready. Batter has fermented, so I divided it into 2. I'm not showing you the footage where I did that because we had a problem with electricity. It had gone, so I tried to work on the lighting. It was too bright, so that footage didn't come out well. But I first of all put vanilla essence or flavoring in the whole dough, divided it into 2, put cocoa powder in one with a few drops of milk, stirred in until it was well stirred, and then, as you saw, started putting in greased pans in turns, pouring the one without cocoa first, then the one with cocoa, to form the layers of the batter. And then now came to cook them without an oven, to bake them without an oven, as you've seen, on very low flame. Like I said, the same principle. Allow 30 minutes on full flame to heat up the pan. Reduce as though you're switching off and get it to the lowest, the kind that if you blew hard on it, it would actually go off. I also need to add that for most burners, when it's the tiny burner on your cooker, usually when you reduce it to the lowest, the way it's been designed by your manufacturer, usually it will bake your cake. But you need to just know your cooker. But I explain all that on our other channel, Recipes and Hospitality with Clara, on this particular cake, and of course many of the cakes where I bake without an oven. So as our cakes were cooking, I got to work on my mandazi recipe. Again, a very simple one that I'll share in the description, where I mix the dry ingredients, the flour, the sugar, the salt, the bicarbonate of soda, the baking powder. I mix in a 3/4 cup of sourdough starter. I mix in 1 tablespoon of butter, but melted. And then I finish off with milk. Actually, the egg that I used in this recipe was the one that I'd used as egg wash, so that it doesn't get spoiled, wasted. I just added it into this recipe and added cardamom spice. And we had very delightful mahamri or mandazi recipe. It's somewhere between mahamri and mandazi now that it has eggs. So allowed it to bulk ferment overnight. That's my little sourdough starter left, so I'm going to cover it and transfer to the fridge to await the next feeding in a week or so, or when I need it. So now this is our brioche bread. It's a rather heavy dough, so it has bulk fermented, thankfully, but it has not risen so much the way the other ones would rise, because it's fairly heavy and has quite some butter or marge. I just noticed that sourdough recipes that have marge or butter tend not to, what's the word? They don't rise, the way the others will, like the focaccia one did. But I think the butter within it causes it to be rather heavy. So what I did is I kneaded it for a minute or so, and then got to divide it into 2, and then divided each piece further into 3 pieces, and then got to make ropes out of the 3 pieces so that I could weave it into a nice rope-like shape to make that delightful brioche bread recipe. So once I had arranged the 2 ropes that I had made in my pan, sometimes when I do some of the breads, rather than working with greasing the pan, I just prefer to line it with baking paper because of course it's less messy. You don't have to work with greasing the pan. I find it easier, and usually on a day like this I will keep reusing my baking paper rather than cutting new. Once I've baked a particular cake, I just take that baking paper, put it in the next pan, and we use it for baking. So went ahead and baked that without an oven on my gas stove or cooker, using the same principle that I have used. So now just getting to get some of the leaves of my rosemary so that I could cut them up, because I want to make focaccia bread where I've sprinkled some rosemary. Yeah, I have 2 breads. That's how I'm dividing that into 2. So just grating my garlic 2 pieces so that I could also add to my rosemary. So those are our marble cakes baking, together with our brioche bread on the other side baking. The marble cake is ready. The other one took slightly longer on the wider burner, but this one on the smaller burner cooked faster. Yeah, so because I like it to brown on the surface, I'm going to work on it in such a way that I invert it back into the pan by turning it onto a clean lid and then inverting it onto another clean lid so that that cream part is back on the surface. I slide the pan back over it so that that cream part is inverted into the pan, and then I'll allow it to just cook for 10 minutes because the cake is basically cooked. We just need it to brown on that surface. So this is the focaccia bread. You just dip in your fingers like I'm doing to form those delightful, what are they called? Holes within the bread. It's quite oily on the surface because we dipped it in that oil I had applied in my greased pan. And then now, sorry, it's a bit too bright. I'm just sprinkling in the rosemary and the garlic. And basically that's it. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other one because remember I divided the dough into 2. And then we are going to bake it without an oven. I couldn't wait to see how this turned out because I had never done focaccia. I was testing it and I wanted to see what would happen when it is baked without an oven. I also need to add that I sprinkled some little salt on the surface of both, and then went ahead and baked them because now our cakes were ready, and so the burners were free so that we could bake these ones. So you can see one of the cakes is ready. Yeah, so waited for the other one for a few more minutes so that it could brown on the surface. I'm also just inverting it onto a baking paper piece now that I was going to allow them to rest before frosting them the next morning when they were fully cool. So these are the ones that we have baked. I know they took about 30 or so minutes to bake, and then on the surface they took about 20 minutes when I turned them over, because I turned them over into the pan so that that top part could brown the way it has done. And I wasn't disappointed at all with this recipe, apart from the fact that I was going to reduce the oil so that I see how it comes out before sharing it fully. So that was it. So the next day got to cut into it because, like I told you, I finished all this baking after midnight. I was ready to go to bed because that was later than my usual bedtime. But I thought now this morning I can just share how it looks. But of course, if you want it really crunchy and you know, that crunchy bread, of course, having it when it has just cooled somewhat is good. But I liked the feel of it. You can see how nice it looks with those nice airy holes within it. I know we are going to enjoy it. And then the ones that I had browned earlier, the bread pieces, that's how it looks on the inside. I don't know if you can see it well. And of course our brioche bread. I didn't mind it, except that it is quite didn't turn out as airy as the ones that we do without sourdough, but I had a feeling that would happen because with sourdough it's a little bit not as airy as the other one, but I wasn't disappointed with how it looks on the inside. But I'm still yet to taste it even more before I share it on our other channel. And then my mandazi that I worked on, I didn't see the point of sharing that. I will just share the recipe in the description. You know how I rolled up, cut it up into pieces, and then got to fry. And then of course this day also got to frost my cake with a very simple frosting that I will share in the recipe that I'm sharing over on our other channel. A very simple frosting, and we loved this cake, and I'm sure when you try it out you will. Thankfully, like I said, it's healthier than your normal marble cake now that you've worked on it with sourdough. So basically those are the recipes that I worked on, and apart from the bread, which baked and baked and baked in the oven without getting fully ready, that was the first recipe and an indicator that there's a problem with my oven. I'm really grateful that I learned the skill of baking without an oven. If I hadn't, I don't know what I would do. Perhaps I would have to light my jikos and bake on the jikos, because at least that's what I grew up knowing how to. But on my gas stove, I mean, that's a skill I learned later on through my sister. So I'm really grateful for that skill, because basically I finished the bread off on top of my gas stove, and all these recipes, the chocolate cake, the brioche bread, the focaccia bread, all these had to be baked without an oven, and I'm grateful I was able to make it. And now we have a few breakfasts and a few lunches. Not all lunches, but a few of them that we would do as sandwiches in the freezer for us to work with. So I hope you have enjoyed today's video, and try baking without an oven on your gas stove, so that if you don't have an oven or your oven gets spoiled like mine did, you will definitely know what to do. As is always our custom, as we finish the video, we will pray and just trust the Lord that our homemaking will bring glory to Him. Father, please be with me and my viewer, and grant that you will be glorified by all that you enable us to do in our homes. Grant that you will help us to fruitfully do your will, accomplishing your purposes, even as you help us to be innovative, to learn skills that will help us in the course of our homemaking, so that we will serve you for the glory and honor of your name. Thank you that you're the giver of creativity in all this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.